We have about 2 minutes and we'll get started. So there'll be plenty of time to buy books and get the authors to sign after the event. So thank you all for coming, and we'll be starting pretty soon. All right, we will get started here. If you want to find your seats. So my name is Marty Atkinson. I'm the Adult Programming Coordinator for Peter White Public Library. Also, who's going to be doing a short reading, 20-minute reading from her work to get you all set. And let's give a big hand for Lynn Domina.
Hello, everybody. It's good to see you all. Those I know personally and those I don't. I'm hiding my water here. Marty asked me if I would like some water, and I said, well, I'm probably going to get a little dry-mouthed, but I'll also be afraid to drink it because I will choke, and then I will die in front of you all, and the only thing anyone will ever remember about me is, isn't she that poet who died at a reading because she choked on her water? So it's there, my security blanket. But I thought what I'd do is read one or two poems from each book, because I've read a fair amount from my most recent couple that have come out since I've lived in Marquette, but I've never read much from my earlier work in Marquette. So I'll read one or two poems from each book and then end with a brand new poem that no one ever has heard. Okay, so the first book is called Corporal Works, and it contains a sequence of poems that are scattered throughout the collection, all called Objects from Still Lives, with a subtitle of a particular object. And what I was doing was taking a particular object as a controlling image or metaphor, and also then exploring the theme of people whose lives are at some still point that needs to become less still. Right? So this one is Objects for Still Lives, pair. With one hand, he guides the bottom of the steering wheel, practicing careless flair. With the other, he grips the hips of a pear. Its rough freckles annoy him. Fruit should fulfill its myth, frighten him with ripe odor, gulps of juice. This pear is so bland he wants to spit. He's searching for an orchard keeper who distills liqueur from the skins of Bartlett's, Kiefer's, Garbers. If he can offer a bottle with a pear-shaped diamond he's bought for their anniversary, his wife will believe his imagination is lively. She'll believe she should stay. He hopes the liqueur will taste as full as her throat. Kissing her there, he wants no more than to breathe her cologne, a scent as lush as the wind in July. He reviews the reasons she must think him dull. His insistence on shish kebab every Tuesday. His collection of fortunes from Chinese diners. His ornithologist's life list. He wishes he still believed his habits were charming. Last night when she watered the garden, he heard her hum an unfamiliar melody. He can't decide whether the longing was the song or her voice. He's certain the slow growth of the eggplant was all that distracted her. When he returns with these bushels of fruit, his own intuited recipe, her glance will be happy, startled, and happy. I wrote, all the poems in this book before I met my wife, and so the relationships here that are described in this collection are less attractive, let's just say. So it's a whole lot of people wanting to be out of what they're in. But here's another one that is, it's not from that sequence. It's a little bit irreverent, but I believe in a bit of irreverence at every reading. It's called Insomnia with Fireplace. That spark is the soul of a crow, that smoke the breath of the dead. It rises, graceful as a sari, as if the dead still preen over their bodies. The dead smoke stogies, play stud poker, keep me awake coughing in the middle of the night. They forget they're just corpses, courteously decayed. The earth crushes their lungs, lichen blooms along their nerves. They itch and blame each new rash on the stiff wool of their funeral suits. They're ready to teach me the game. Dealer calls aces, deuces, one-eye jacks wild. They drink Crown Royal from jelly glasses. They eat cheese and jalapenos. It's New Year's Eve. It's the Chinese New Year. It's the eve of St. Swithin. You're dead, I tell them, dead and gone, dead and buried. You met your maker. You're down for the count. The smoke they blow in my face smells like frankincense, or so they say. They'll keep me company. They'll tuck me in with a hot toddy. They'll tell me a story that ends with marriage. The dead are obstinate and have no etiquette. So now I'll move on to a collection called Framed in Silence, and it also has a couple of sequences in it. The first third of the book takes the first creation story from the book of Genesis in the Bible and responds to it in a much more detailed, almost kind of a manic way. And so what I did is take each one of those phrases, the beasts of the field, the plants, all that, the dome of the sky, and created an entire poem from the phrase. So the one I will read is called Every Kind of Plant. Humus and sand and clay covering gold, silver, gems, guaranteed God sufficient color in a sufficient universe. Still, green suggested its variety to God's eye, suggested itself key to some command, make it new. Make the earth soft and renewable. Recalling crystals, their regular angles, God considered leaves, a different pattern for each kind of plant, rhomboid, elliptic, orbicular, the palmate ivies. God saw now beads of water shimmering against English ivy, sun dispersing rain, waves of light bending through dew, odd and even pinnates of black locust and black walnut, complex and delicate leaflets of honey locust. God attached each leaf to its own stalk, stretched stems into roots, couldn't resist tasting carrot and potato. The woody plants God arranged into shrubbery and forest, realized holly and spruce and cedar could relinquish their leaves inconspicuously. Oak and ash and chestnut leaves, released in a heap each autumn, might lead to compost or curiosities for young dogs or soft landings for children jumping from ladders to learn flight. God relished such a good day's work until, to God's astonishment, the lily and larkspur, the olive branch and pear tree, the dandelion and orchid burst into blossom, their petals as geometric and variegated as leaves and any color but green. God understood anew that light only mimics transparency, as it is absorbed and reflected by solid objects, and liquids and gases, as it compels one's eye left and right, as it permits its own conversion into oxygen. And with oxygen, God knew, creation need never be complete. Someone reprimanded me for some of the statements I make in that series, suggesting that I don't really know the mind of God. And I assured that person that I do. Yeah. So, when you're a poet, you have to be arrogant because the whole world ignores you, right? So, you have to at least believe you know the mind of God. So, speaking of that, this next poem is called Discussing Luther After the Episcopal Church Supper. And it's about that centuries-long argument between Protestants and Catholics about faith versus works, right? Which is a silly argument, okay? Which is one of the reasons I'm probably going to hell. However, here's the poem. Discussing Luther After the Episcopal Church Supper. As soon as Father Hart mentions fruits of faith, my mind floats to an unpruned apple tree behind my garden. The apples not buds yet, the tree neglected generations. Faith assures apples will ripen. So it must be experience that insists they'll remain hard knobs, inedible wormy balls. Still, they draw deer, and the deer draw my gaze. Their alert ears, velvety necks I wish to stroke just once. Their smooth haunches, grace infusing each stride. Once, coming upon a buck, as I strolled through mist and he tilted his head at my step, I felt mystical. Most often, though, I noticed only their peculiar grape-sized scat heaped in squat pyramids behind the tree and wonder, why must I see signs only? Come June, I imagine they nuzzle the clump of wild strawberries that wreaths a decaying stump. Perhaps, though I have never seen such zeal, they push through thorns, trampling dead canes to tongue overripe raspberries from their nubs. Were I wild as deer or rabbit, I would suck fruit from its stem too, the juice staining my muzzle, dripping onto my forelegs. In one story, Jesus cursed the fig tree for its failure to bear fruit out of season. A bit harsh, though doesn't hunger shove each of us past reason? Dare I demand a God's accounting? I have never tasted fresh fig, never split its skin with my teeth, peeling away sweet flesh. Perhaps such flavor excuses rash oaths. Nor have I eaten lychee, pawpaw, papaya, breadfruit, cassava, or huckleberry. I could vow to savor every fruit, grainy pear, creamy avocado, bitter kumquat. Earn my way to heaven, one luscious bite at a time. Faith, works, one must be the melon I split open, one the chunk I offer between fingertips, urging, here, taste this. Okay, next I'm going to read just one from Inland Sea. It's a bit of a fantasy, a useful fantasy at some points. A long time ago, I was stuck on the George Washington Bridge in New York for like 3 hours. And there was the show Selected Shorts was on the radio. And they were reading a story, and I can't remember the name of it, but there was one character in it called Rezban, the Romanian liar. And he was ostensibly a psychiatrist. And his patient had dissociated a lot. And so he was teaching her about dissociation, and they called it Slatland, going to Slatland, right? And ever since then, I have used Slatland as a useful device in some situations. This is not exactly Slatland. This is much more pleasant than Slatland, but it's a similar kind of response. It's called Balloon, and it's set, in my imagination, north of the beach, between the beach at McCarty's Cove and the working ore dock. Balloon. I stoop to tie my shoes, the neon yellow laces frayed at their ends, leaking fine threads like hair that won't stay combed. And I reach to catch the yellow threads floating up and through my closed screen door, then drifting, light enough to be buoyed without the least breeze. I grasp one thread, grab on like I'm holding a balloon, a yellow, smiley-faced, don't worry, be happy balloon, and feel my bare feet lift out of my shoes and off the grass, and feel the arches of my feet cool and then curl around themselves, my feet small, lowercase O's, my legs exclamation points above them. Children point up toward me. A boy hoisting his striped shirt above his belly, a girl clutching a trio of dandelions, their parents lifting their hands like salutes to block the glare, squinting, confused, as if they can't see me. I've floated past the lighthouse, the breakwall, the Coast Guard tugboat. I'm waving now with my left hand, waving at 3 otters splashing each other near the boat launch, at kayaks and kayakers and their yellow life vests, the shipwreck upside down on the lake floor since 1869, waving, waving, until all I see is the sun's wide ray, tempting as a playground slide and angled straight toward the beach, in case I want someday to return. And then this chapbook that just came out, it's only 2 weeks or so old, it's called Killing Him. And the hymn does have a specific reference in the book, but sometimes I imagine other reference. It's about this story. It's responding to the story of Judith and Holofernes in the Bible, in which Judith decapitates Holofernes with his own sword, which is very satisfying. But it's also about this artist, this mosaic artist, who has created these huge mosaics of the story, including the one that's on the cover. So the poem I'll read from here is about, I went to an exhibit that she had in Toronto, and it was all of the mosaics in the whole series. And it was in this circular gallery, and it was so gorgeous. But I don't know anything about visual art except I like it or I don't like it, right? So I was trying to learn some things. And so this poem is called Learning to See. I followed the exhibit counterclockwise, then clockwise, intrigued by sketches and acrylics flanking the mosaics, art revealing its artifice. I saw how the artist divided her image into thirds, how Holofernes stretched his arm across the panel, mindful of symmetry. I saw how Judith's thrust sword marked the midpoint, how each of the gray and white and brown squares, the tesserae, I learned the word, were cut not identically but similarly. I bought the catalog, studied the process until I understood everything: mesh substrates, heavy panels set against the glass, oxides enhancing each color's shimmer. I understood everything except how she took a story I'd heard and heard, recoiled against, dismissed, and stopped my breath with its splendor. Okay. I'm going to read one more poem, it's brand new. Marty facilitated a workshop a few weeks ago when we had the NEA Big Read, and had some really interesting prompts. And so I wrote this poem in response to one of his prompts. And, it's all right. And I got home, and I thought, like a couple other people in the workshop, I liked the first line, but I didn't like anything else. So I kept the first line and rewrote the whole rest of it. So that's what you're going to hear. It's called Dying Sometimes, Sometimes Surviving. Another word for ancestor is mustache. Another word for mustache is whisper. Another word for whisper is autumn. Red leaves rustle, spiral, drift, promising after winter, spring. In the back garden, 5 broccoli plants offer sweeter harvest following light frost. Another word for autumn is breath. Another word for breath is apple, the fruit, the blossom. Before the blossom, the bud, the branch, the seed. An apple's skin glistens, green feathering among red. Another word for apple is song, a melody for those shy of singing. Notes flutter up the staff like birds migrating. Among them, silent monarchs swoop, dying sometimes, often. Another word for song is hope. Some monarchs survive, some wrens return. Another word for hope is ancestor. Thank you.
Lynn, you forgot your water. Here you go.
But she didn't die.
No, she didn't die. I'd love to take credit for that poem, but I'm not going to. That's wonderful. Thank you. So I'm just going to, before I introduce Kim, I'm just going to let you know a couple things that are coming up later this week, since I got a almost full house here. So tomorrow night we have a dinner and a movie. It's going to start at 6 p.m. It's Jim Jarmusch's film, Patterson, starring Adam Driver. If you've never seen it, you should come and see it. It's a really wonderful, wonderful film about a bus driver who's a poet. And so we'll have tables set up. You can bring your dinner and enjoy dinner here. I'll make popcorn if that's a draw, or you can have popcorn for dinner. I don't care. No, this is a no judgment zone when it comes to stuff like that. And then Thursday night we have another wonderful poet who's going to be coming up, Jeff Cass from the Ann Arbor area, and he just released a new book of poems called True Believer, which is all about Marvel origin stories. So I'm really excited to have Jeff back up here. He was here probably about 5 years ago, I think, 4 or 5 years ago, for his other book that was a Michigan Notable book, The Teacher Pizza Guy. So anyway, Jeff will be here on Thursday night at 6:30 p.m. And then on Friday, we have two wonderful events with Cindy Hunter Morgan. At 10 a.m., we have a poetry workshop that anybody is welcome to participate in. And all you got to do is register. I think we capped it at 15, but if you show up, I'll probably let you in. And then that starts at 10 upstairs in the Shiras room. And then if you want to, it ends at 12, and then at 12:30, we come down here, and she's going to screen some short films from her Filmetry Poetry Film Festival that she organizes every year at the beginning of April. And then on Saturday, we have our teen poetry contest winners at 11 right here in the community room, reading and the award ceremony. And then at 1 p.m., we have our winners of the 3-day International Chapbook Contest who will be reading as well. And then, if that's not enough, if you still haven't had enough poetry in your life, and who doesn't, we're going to have a afterglow event for the Great Lakes Poetry Festival at Rippling River Resort on Sunday at 5 p.m. So, now I get to introduce Kim Blaeser, who is a former Wisconsin Poet Laureate and is also the founding director of Indigenous Nations Poets. She's a poet, a photographer, a scholar, and she tells really great stories, too. She is the author of 6 poetry collections, most recently Ancient Light, which just came out in 2024, Dancing Resistance in 2020, Copper Yearning, and she also edited Traces in Blood, Bone, and Stone Contemporary Ojibwa Poetry, and wrote the monograph Gerald Visner, Writing in the Oral Tradition, on the work of a fellow White Earth writer, and served as contributing editor for When the Light of the World Was Subdued, Our Songs Came Through, a Norton anthology of Native Nations poetry. She has been widely published. And I'm just going to tell you a few of the other things that she's done, because you want to hear her, you don't want to hear me. So she is also the 2024 Mackey Chair in Creative Writing at Beloit College. She is a professor emerita at UW-Milwaukee and an MFA faculty member for the Institute of American Indian Arts. She serves on the Poetry Coalition of the Academy of American Poets, and she is vice president of Letters for Wisconsin Academy of Sciences, Arts, and Letters. And her accolades also include a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Native Writers Circle of the Americas. And I just found out that her daughter is a fiction writer, but we're not going to hold that against her. So please welcome to the stage Kim Blaeser.
Bonjour, everyone. Great to see you. Kim Blaeser, Nindiginakaz, Anishinaabe Kwe, Nindao, Gawababi Bonikag, Nindunjaba, Migizi, Nindodam. So I'm Kim Blaeser. I'm Anishinaabe from the White Earth Nation of northwestern Minnesota, and I'm Migizi, or Eagle Clan. It's great to be here. We had such a beautiful day. We hiked around Presque Isle. Island. That was really beautiful. It's like perfect. So you have this wonderful adult programming person who brings all of those things to you. I'm campaigning to become a visiting poet here. Just so, vote for that, please. So I'm going to read a little, primarily from Ancient Light, but maybe I'm going to dip back into the Copper Yearning and maybe one or two new poems. Depends on how many stories I tell that slow me down. But I thought I would begin with a poem that introduces me by way of place. The where in my belly. Scientists say my brain and heart are 73% water. They underestimate me. A small island, Minnes, I emerged from Minnesota's northern lakes. The where of Monoman, wild rice in my belly. I am from boats and canoes and kayaks, from tribal ghosts who rise at dawn, dance like wisps of fog on water. My where is White Earth Nation and white pine forests, knees summer stained with blueberries, pink lady slippers open and wild as my feet. I grew up where math was canasta, where we recited times tables while ice fishing at 20 below, spent nights whistling to northern lights. I am from old medicine barks and teas, from early, the air damp with cedar, the crack of a mick, beaver tails on water. Their echo now, a warning to where fish become a percentage of mercury, become a poison statistic, to where copper mines back against 1,000,000 blue acres of sacred. I am from Nabih and Ogichidaqueg, women warriors and water protectors, from seed gatherers and song makers, the wet where pulse in my belly, whispers and repeats, like the endless chant of waves on ledge rock. Waves on ledge rock, on ledge rock, on waves, on water, Nabih. Regrets. So I want to say just a couple things about Ancient Light. There's kind of a trajectory through this book, and it begins, as many things do, with colonization and everything that colonization has wrought. And I don't only mean for Indigenous people, but what it's done to our environment, that sort of mentality of ownership and possession. And so it opens that way, and then it moves into how do we survive? How do we heal? How do we flourish? How do we live an other way? And my broad answer in 2 words is Ancient Light. But the poems kind of open that up. So I'm going to walk through that path a little bit with you. And so I'm going to begin first with this poem. Poem on disappearance. Beginning with our continent, draw 1491. Each mountain point, each compass point, mountain, indigenous. Trace trade routes, languages, seasonal migrations. Don't become attached. Yes, reshape by discovery, displacement. Move your pencil point quickly now, as if pursued. A cavalry of possession. erases homelands. We shrink in time lapse of colonial barter, disappear. Now draw a brown face painted for ceremony, half a face, nothing. Draw nothing around a crumpled bird body, no wings. Draw emptiness inside desecrated burial mounds, a stretch of absence where fallopian tubes once curved in hope. Sketch void across Buffalo Prairie. Draw the empty of elk, of passenger pigeon, of silver trout. Conjure with your hand the shape of girl blooming, curves of face, her laughing eyes, you've seen them, postered and amber alerted, missing, evening newsed, and gone. Draw a woman wrapped in a blanket, a child's body weighted. Draw stones sinking into every river on the map. Draw carrion blackening skies, carrion plucking vision from round brown faces. Draw missing, draw murdered. Work carefully now. Turn your hand to the new continent. Again picture it. Nothing. Thank you. I know, it's hard. Those are hard poems too. But I have one more that's kind of tough before we move into like how can we rise above and build. So I want to say one sentence. I left the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee because of their bad behavior around NAGPRA. Taxonomy. The ancestors live in boxes now. I live squared, only head. The world is blue screen, is scream. Name something intact without acronyms. Morning cormorant, a silhouette, elongated in familiar, a routine of hunger, then bulk. We swallow whole the impossible. Nobody feeds prettily. Avert your eyes, survive. The ancestors live in white cardboard boxes. I am fasting, no news feed or rumor. Politics, a super spreader. How we shelter in non-places. Here the hooked bill of the cormorant fills. I ignore the chat, have exited the Zoom room. My dry throat opens to swallow, convulses by reflex or instinct. Waterbirds, we live this story. Ancestors wait on shelves in numbered boxes. They dive, propel themselves with webbed feet, shaggy cormorant wings spread wide to dry. Perhaps we are not praying when we lift our arms. Congrats. So I'm going to move on to some things that are more about how we together can make a difference, how we can change the circumstances. So if you remember in the first term of our current president, there was a lot of name-calling and there was a lot of division that was created and so forth. And one of my colleagues decided to edit an issue of a journal on dignity as an endangered species. And so the poem that I wrote came out of this incident that happened on the mall in Washington. Do you remember the old Native man who was drumming on the mall in Washington? And then he was confronted by the MAGA-wearing youth. And what did he do? Nothing. Just kept drumming, right? And so for me, that was like, that is an act of dignity, right? That is just a calm response to provocation. And so I wrote the poem with him in mind, although it's barely about him. He's only mentioned once. So then Marty mentioned that I founded Indigenous Nations Poets, and at the tail end of the pandemic, we were able to have our first mentoring retreat for young writers in DC at the Library of Congress, where I told the fellows, make sure you look around, because how many times do you pass the Gutenberg Bible on the way to the bathroom? So yeah, but anyway, it was a really great event, and Joy Harjo was closing out her term as U.S. Poet Laureate. And if you know Joy Harjo at all, you will understand that the very last thing she wanted to do was have a dance party. So we had a dance party at the close of this retreat. And that day we had done a faculty reading. So I read this poem because I thought, DC, what better place to read it? And I had two things as I went to the dance party, because if you're going to dance, you don't want to be burdened. I had that book because we were coming right from the reading, and I had my purse. So we had the greatest time dancing, and it was just celebrating. It was lovely. And then we were leaving and we were going out to dinner, and a couple of the fellows came and got me before I got into the taxi and said, the man you read that poem for is here. And so then I was like, oh my goodness. So I went back up, and sure enough, he was there, looking a little bedraggled. Anyway, I went up and I just introduced myself, and I said, I just wanted to tell you that I was so impressed by the way you handled yourself in the moment in that incident. And I actually dedicated a poem to you. And it was interesting because I had these young fellows with me, and he had these youth with him. And they said, can you read it to him? And I had two things, my purse and my book, right? So I was able to read it to him. And there's this really cool photo that someone made where I'm standing side by side with him, and the Capitol is behind us. But I read the poem, and then I was like, well, let me sign this. I'll give this to you. So I'm leaning over on this wall signing, and I hear him say to his youth, he said, I'm in that book. That poem is about me. And it was just one of those moments where poetry finds its way. You throw those poems out in the world, you don't know what's going to happen with it. And that one just went home. And then, so I arrived late to dinner, and everyone was already there, and I was so excited and told them the story. And somebody said, oh, that was serendipity. And I don't know if you know who Lucy Tapahanso is, but she was the inaugural Poet Laureate of the Navajo Nation. And she said, that was not serendipity. The spirits were all over that. So it's a really beautiful thing. And then Joy called me the next day and said, that was the best ending. So, long story, not a very long poem. On the Dignity of Gestures, for Nathan Phillips. 1, remember hands ungloved and notched by life. Watch them pour stovetop coffee into tin cups. Lift cross poles onto fence bucks, mend nets, rock your children. 2, pay homage and speak the names of sweepers and shovelers, canners, cafeteria cooks, baby doctors, and deathbed watchers. Esme, Dale, Margaret, David, Mike, and Colleen. 3, receive all gifts, crocheted Afghan or prize money, with humility. Gratitude spreads easy as butter. Unworthiness endures. 4, watch the eyes of turtle. Admire the neck courting of swan. Study wing beats and tail rhythms. Note how otter sows stoop to lift pups. Listen to wind in fall, to trees bending and unbroken. Announce like spring frogs the unfolding of each holy year. Carry candles into cathedrals, poetry into prisons. 5. Do not become beast in the fray. Remember the indigenous hands that drummed on the man who stood strong. Another poem that is thinking about connection more than division is this really slight poem that, more than any poem I've ever written, has had a big, long life journey. And it's called About Standing in Kinship. We all have the same little bones in our foot, 26 with funny names like navicular. Together, they build something strong. Our foot arch, a pyramid holding us up. Those bones don't get casts when they break. We tape them, one phalange to its neighbor for support. Other things, like sorrow, work that way too. Find healing in the leaning, in the closeness. Our feet have 1/4 of all the bones in our body. Maybe we should give more honor to feet and to all the tiny but blessed cogs in the world, communities, the forgotten architecture of friendship. And then I also have poems that all have the same name. You read some of yours. So in this book, there's a whole group of poems that I thought might be a series, and then I realized they weren't a series, they were an aesthetic. And they come out of the Anishinaabe dream song tradition, and maybe also out of haiku in the Zen tradition. And I could give a whole class about that, but bring me back as you're visiting right now. And so they're spread, all throughout this book. So rather than try to find those pages, I printed them, and I'm going to read those in a sequence. The way we love something small. The translucent claws of newborn mice. This pearl cast of color. The barely perceptible, like a ghosted threshold of being here, not here, the single breath we hold on the thinnest verge of sight, not there, there, a curve nearly naked, an arc of almost, a wisp of becoming, a wand, tiny enough to change me. The way we love something small. Vowel sounds from a language not yet lost. Muningwanig konig, Minis. My tongue and island too, swimming where Migas rises. This ache, tiny but growing, the place I keep it. The way we love something small. In the cold blur hour of winter, the world wound tight and blue, while we fold and triangle white paper, our kindergarten scissors, an act of God. We open, close, and fractal, replicating. Even then our tenderness, too big for accuracy. The way we love something small. Moon glow in the saddle of mountains, a golden eye opening, Now we who watch Jesus rising, we too grow round with being seen. The next one is not called The Way We Love Something Small in the book, but it should be. My mistake. The Way We Love Something Small. Alaskan poems you didn't write live like drum beats under your skin, whisper, scratch you on the other side of sound. What is meter but another word for memory? Caribou bending to water in blue light, the unreality of mountain peaks at dawn, endless tundra littered by shed antlers, all jagged and boned, glimpses of eternity. We watch days bump suns in Alaskan skies, our pockets empty of words for measure. How eloquent this lapping against singularity. The way we love something small. Here, delicate ink of mayflies on the glazed gray pottery of lake, graveyard of tiny ghosts on summer cerulean, elongated bodies splayed, the stained glass window of their wings translucent, how they flutter, a ballet for fishes. Shimmer of wings repeats, repeats, repeats across some glass surface of being. How our eyes count infinity, how exquisitely it eludes. The way we love something small, inky leaf shadows on snow, each animal track a hollow, trace of bird feet, double oval of deer, the glyphs we make, the ones we follow. So I have a million of those, and that's a sample. And I should say Happy Earth Day. That's my selection, is a lot around Happy Earth Day. And I wanted to send those out for my nephew, Jason, who was born on Earth Day. Isn't that great? Wouldn't you like to have your birthday on Earth Day? All right. So then I want to do a little bit. In this book, another thing that is part of Ancient Light is, so I've been doing this project called Language Back, and it's, there's so much to say about it, but Indigenous language, embedded in it are traditional Indigenous teachings. And at this moment in time, when the climate is in crisis, we really could use that knowledge. So for me, the idea of encouraging people to write in their heritage language is a way of bringing that knowledge not only to their poetry, but to their audiences, not only to their Indigenous community, but to all communities. And the way that poetry can, call our attention to something that other kinds of writing might not. So this is a whole project we've been doing called Language Back through Poetry. And I grew up with grandparents who were native language speakers. My oldest aunts and uncles were boarding school era, were sent to Pipestone Indian Boarding School, which was 266 miles away from White Earth. And my two uncles actually ran away because boarding school, if you know anything about it, is not a place people love to be. And one of my uncles had childhood polio. So he had trouble walking somewhat, but his brother would carry him. And if you also know about boarding schools, they often sent people out to find you and bring you back and punish you for, whatever. So they hid all day long, and then they walked at night. And there's so much of their story that's in my memory. And so that even though I came along later, and we did live with my grandparents, so I always say that I have an ear for language and I have baby Ojibwe. But like a lot of people, I'm trying to become more fluent. But one of my poems asks, how do you conjugate after 40? Because if you know the way Anishinaabe works, actually I think I'll teach you a word before I read this poem. The way that Anishinaabe-Moan works is there's a little morpheme in the center. And then there's prefixes and suffixes, and they are the things that tell relationship and who's speaking and to whom they're speaking and all of that kind of thing. So the longest word in the Ojibwe language, does anyone know? 64 letters. I'm going to teach you, and then you can say, I know the longest word in the Ojibwe language. Minabashki, Minasagani, Batoso Chagani, Badwingwash Chagani, Bakwejigan. Which, can you guess what it means? So it's really it's a story, and it's the story of how to make blueberry pie. So that whole word means blueberry pie. Do you want to just try saying it? Okay. Minabashki, Minasagani, Batosa Chagani, Badwingwash Chagani, Bakwejigan. And there's really cool images in there. Because it's like the berries, which are min, and they're like their little faces are being covered by the bread. I mean, it's really a beautiful. The whole story that's in the word is really beautiful. But so if you want to take just one tiny part of that away from you, Bakwejigan. Bakwejigan really means bread. So you know an Ojibwe word now. Okay, so I'm just going to do a poem. It's actually the beginning of this book, and then it's a poem. It's not long, but it'll just give you a taste of that journey to claim and reclaim language. Akawe, a prelude. Between languages, in the shadow of old losses, we adorn ourselves. Everywhere careful words break, open, they feed us, remembrance like bread. Songs like bread, Wikwandawin. Inhabited, we whisper sort, tongue hungers, this blood caress of gone, and almost melody. Nuji ikwewe nagamo, courting song. How we yearn for morsels, words, memory tangle of hands kneading bakwejigan. This dollop of sweetest dough, a language prisoner's bread. This is to hunger, buckaday. This is to break, bigoshkad. To speak is to eat, Wikwandawin, feast food, our jagged stuttering, a giveaway. Mario iriwag, this is to share. All right, so now I'm going to move on. I've been picking these also because of maybe how they connect to what I imagine your lifestyle is here. And this is a poem called The Knife My Father Gave Me at 8. 1 inch longer than my empty ring finger, no field master multifunction wonder, a single blade case, slim line trapper, pocket knife my brother would teach me to thumb, open, closed, open, closed, open again, until I could slide it out quick and smooth, until I could point it, flick my wrist, throw and sink it every time, blade first, in this sweet summer white earth clay, respect it, wipe it clean on my jeans. The knife my father gave me at 8 whispered to me the things he left unsaid. Small, sharp, and pearl-handled pretty, it does the work of any man's blade. All right. I'm going to I want to say that if you have a chance, whether or not you want to buy this book, you should also take a look at, I can't possibly read this to you, but there are pictopoems in here. So you might want to just see some of the other kinds of things I'm at work on in there, and there's a reason for that. I'm going to read maybe 2 poems from here and then call it a night, okay? So you do wild rice up here, right? You collect, okay. I think I'll do the wild rice poem. So there's also a broadside of this in the back. Minomen Ike Gizis, ricing moon, when poling arms groan like autumn winds through white pine. Old rhythms find the hands, bend and pound the rice kernels falling onto wooden ribs, canoe bottom filling with memories. New moccasins dance the rice. Huffs of spirit wind lift and carry the chaff, blown like tired histories from birch bark winnowing baskets. Now numbered by pounds, seasons, and generations, lean slivers of parched grain settle, brown and rich, tasting of northern lakes, of centuries. And then, since I did the poem, since I told you the story about my uncles being at boarding school, I want to do this poem that is, it's actually, there's a little French book back there, Equanimity Dance, let's see, En Danse, Résister en Danse, Equanimity Dancing Resistance. So it's dance by resistance. But this is, if you know do you know the jingle dress up here? And you know the way that the jingle dress is both used for healing, but also for resistance, right? Because we need healing not only from physical ails, but from things like racism. So a lot of people, including me, during the pandemic, we started coming out every Saturday in different parts of the country, and then it just spread that we would all be out on Saturday at whatever time, and we would all be dancing because we were all isolating. Remember, we isolated for weeks, and then we would send our pictures and posts, and so we felt like we were building a community for healing in the midst of the pandemic. So this is, if I can find it, okay. So it's a little poem. And Equanimity really means the woman's dance. That's what it means. Equanimity, dancing resistance. Oh, I should say a couple more things. Okay, about the jingle dress. That the jingle dress is meant to have 365 silver cones, one for each day of the year. That it came about in a dream. It came about during the Spanish flu epidemic, so it was exactly 100 years before the COVID epidemic. So there's a lot of parallel things. And the story is that it came about in Minnesota, and that there was a man whose daughter was very ill, and he was worried about her because there were a lot of deaths in the Spanish flu epidemic. And he was praying for her, and he fell asleep, and he had a dream. And in his dream, he dreamt about this dress and 4 women wearing this dress. And there were some details, right? And in the Anishinaabe culture, we're always told that you should take your dreams to the elders so they can help you interpret them, and a lot of times to bring them to the community, right? So he did this, and they said, well, we have to perform that dance. So they made the dresses as he had dreamed them. They had women, they were in the lodge, they brought the sick little girl, and she sat in the middle, and the women danced. And the story goes that as the evening wore on, she became stronger, so she was sitting up, and ultimately she was able to stand and dance with the women. and that she was healed. So that's why we call the jingle dress a healing dress. And that's what this poem is alluding to. Ikwe Nimi, dancing resistance. 365 jingles in rows upon my dress, turned by the hands of one who deserted, escaped a mandated pipestone education. 266 miles, looking backwards for pursuit, hiding from promised punishments by day, migrating like Hmong relatives by moonlight. 365 ribbons hold the jingles to my dress, colorful strips cut, tied, and threaded, stitched by the laughing women of my childhood, women who earned $2.25 for pea-stitching geese aprons, pot holders, whose stiff fingers tap drumbeats to sew by. 365 prayers swing and tap one against another. Zongwegwe magode, ancient medicine dress, silver-coned legacy, sounding the cleansing voice of rain. 145th White Earth Nation celebration powwow, the weight of Anishinaabe history on my back, a dress made light by resistance, this healing and art. And if you could imagine wearing 365 combs, anything but light. Okay, so I said I was going to read new, but I'm not going to read new. I'm going to close with a poem in here, unless you demand me to read something else. So this one I offer because I feel like it's been a really hard time for all of us, both through the pandemic and now in other ways that we're losing people. And I think the older you get, the more losses you experience, and I was trying to find a way for myself to walk through that. Afterwards, because the smallness of our being is our only greatness, because one night I was in a room listening until only one heart beat, because in these last years I've worn and nearly worn out my black funeral shoes, because the gesture of afterwards means the same thing, no matter who speaks them, because faith, belief, forever are only words, no matter, because matter disappears always and eventually, because action is not matter, but energy that's spent changes being. And if death too is a change of being, perhaps action counts. And if death is a land of unknowing, perhaps we do well to live with uncertainty. And if death is a forested land, it would be good to learn trees. And if death is a kingdom, it would be good to practice service. And if death is a foreign state, we should loosen allegiance to this one. And if our soul leaves our body, then we must rehearse goodbye. Chimigwech.
Well, thank you all for coming, and thank you, Kim, for your words, your spirit, and for being here. And I'm going to work on that writer in residency thing. I really am. So Snowbound Books is back there selling Kim's book. Please support your local independent bookstore and go back and purchase a book from Snowbound, and I'm sure Kim will be more than willing to sign it for you. So tomorrow night, dinner and a movie, 6 p.m., Jim Jarmusch's Patterson with Adam Driver. Bring a dinner, come and enjoy yourselves, and have a wonderful night, everybody. And free books over there. Those books over there are free for the taking, compliments of Peter White Public Library and the Great Lakes Poetry Festival. And there's boxes, so if you want to buy, just fill up whole boxes, take them, please. Thank you.